I reckon I don't need that. Hello, is everyone alright?
Yeah.
Wicked for coming out like on a school night. I think it's a school night, isn't it? Because we're. I was teaching today. I teach art in a secondary school in northwest London. Same school that I went to as a pupil, which is kind of weird, but kind of nice. I'm really invested in my local community, and it kind of feels like the right place to be, and means that I live amongst my students. So when I'm in Asda in my pyjamas on a Sunday, they're like, "Are you right, sir?" Well, I do like coming home a little bit like half cut from a poetry night during Ramadan and bumping into a bunch of my like Muslim students on their way home from like midnight prayers at mosque. And being like, don't get too close, they're going to smell like alcohol in your breath and it's going to go around the school. But those things are like, you know, that real lived experience of a community I think is really important, and there's a lot in teaching now where you get a lot of people coming in for short-term kind of placements and training as a stepping stone to other things. And I think there's a lot of people that see education as a route to something kind of like better and often better paid and more prestigious. So I like to kind of stay invested. You know, I don't know if I can survive that system forever, but for now, I'm doing all right in it, I think. I'm going to read one poem, because I don't know it off my head, and I don't write a lot about education. Like, I teach full time, you know. When I go home, it's like almost like the last thing I want to think about. You know, I'm not that guy that sits at home marking all night or anything like that. And I think that balance is important. I am my first head teacher in the first school I worked at, which was a primary school for kids who'd been kicked out of school for behaviour issues. He said, "Oh, you're an accidental teacher." And I was like, "Am I?" And he's like, "Yes, I'm an accidental teacher too." He goes, "I wanted to be an actor. It's really hard to make a living out of," and I ended up doing some teaching and then kind of fell into being a teacher. And I wanted to be a filmmaker. Yeah, I knew that at like 13 that I was going to direct films for a living, which I always try and remember when I'm having conversations about how kids should choose everything that they want to learn all the time. Because I never would have gone to a maths lesson in my life if I had the choice to not go to it. I would have been in the art room and I'd have been, you know, nicking paints and trying to borrow cameras and stuff. And then I worked in film, and after a while I was like, wow, this is really full of really privileged people, and there's very few ethnic minorities in here, and it doesn't really reflect the places I grew up. I don't know if I really want to work in this industry anymore. Lucky I did some other stuff at school that I didn't think I liked. One thing I definitely don't like in school is like the amount of testing we're going through. And I wrote this piece when I was invigilating a year 7 exam. So first year of secondary school, and it was a history paper for 11-year-olds on the First World War. And as I was kind of like sitting up by the front of our hall, looking at all these rows of kids as they're writing about like the Somme and talking about, you know, looking at Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon stuff, I was like, wow, these are like trenches. Like, this is cool, like in a scary way. I was like, I wonder if anyone's like picked up on this parallel between what we're doing to these kids and a war. So I wrote this instead of going and taking the bits of paper to the kids with their hands up, because once I got going I thought, oh whatever, this is and it's called The Ink Wars. Today the war will be waged in ink, uniformed and soldier straight. The rows and columns of child warriors wield their weapons, barrels full, bayonet sharp, charging in unison through line upon enemy line, filling the white no man's land, while generals invigilate from stage stairs. This is ideological warfare, in service of the nation's cause, an exercise in precisioned conformity. As the clock Tocks casualties drop off into 1,000-yard stares and the silent cries of raised hands. The best trained and the most privileged fight mercilessly for the cause, while the jaded and the damaged go AWOL. Empty desks stand like the unmarked graves of the most brave, the unworn uniforms of conscientious objectors, who refuse to be slave to their master's class. As the bugle's shrill calls the skirmish to a halt, the shell-shocked survivors file out, weaving between the desecrated headstones in stupefied silence, until, back on neutral ground, their voices return in condemnation and elation at their escape. Somewhere a tear will be shed, privately and silently. The battle is over, but the war will resume. After a brief truce, once more basic human needs have been answered, and perhaps a game of football. The bell will toll again. The ranks will file back to familiar trenches. The death gaze will return. The war will be fought once more. Thank you. So I'm an art teacher in a secondary school, which I think in some ways is kind of like a privileged position to take in a school. It's a subject that no one running the school really has a clue about. You know, they haven't worked out how you get right and wrong answers with colour theory yet. I mean, they're close. So there's like a little bit that I feel like I can dictate a little bit to those in seniority to me, because I know more about art than them. You know, they might know a bit more about when to put an exclamation mark in a sentence post 2015. But so I kind of feel like I have a little bit of space, and a lot of the work I used to do as a teacher when I first went into secondary schools came from my work in primary exclusion school. So I was working with behaviour. I was working with kids who were at risk of exclusion, who were often poor, who were often not white, who often had already had their card marked many times through their educational experience by the time they were 11. And some of those were kids who came from the same school I worked at before. And that again was kind of like another space that no one really understood, because people don't understand behaviour in schools. They understand authoritarianism, and they understand one very narrow kind of definition of discipline, but not the important definition of discipline. You know, the discipline of how to control a pencil or to play piano keys, and to sustain that over a long time until you get good at it, you know, even when you want to stop. That discipline doesn't have a lot of space in school. It takes too long. It's hard to assess in any meaningful way. And actually on that, as a slight tangent, the school that I teach at now and was a student at was also the school that Courtney Pine, the saxophonist, attended. And he famously, about 12 people know this, so it's not that famous. He famously was refused onto the A-level music course because he hadn't done well enough. It was probably O-level at the time he did that. So he hadn't got good enough grades in his like 14-year-old music kind of like education to go on, and he moved to South London and became probably the most famous British jazz musician of the 20th century. And I try and remember that when I'm looking at kids who can't draw by the definitions of like observational drawing, but their shit's really interesting. You know, you're like, that is sick, I would put that up at home. Like, if you told me this was done by a 40-year-old person who'd gone through an Academy of Arts, I'd be like, this is so naive. Like, this is like Picasso-esque in the way that you're kind of keeping the child in here, that you're not being constrained by these ideas about shape and mark making and order, and look what you've done with the way you've ripped that bit of the page off at the corner. Like, it looks almost like it was just stuck under the leg of your chair and you were clearing up, but for me it symbolises the importance of breaking like uniform shapes down, and shit, you are good. You're going to get an E. Sorry. So I try to remember those things, and I'm really glad that Hannah reminded me of that conversation we'd had about staying in the system, fight from within. And as Anise said, I run a group called Hip Hop Ed. I'm a sort of co-convener, is probably an overly poncy term for it. And this is just a group of teachers, artists, rappers, educationalists, workshop leaders, academics, professors, PhD students, a real wide range of people who came together on Twitter. I met the guy that I set it up with because his handle on Twitter was Rap Classroom, and I was like, you sound like a guy who's into hip hop and education. I should have probably had a name more obvious. And we chatted a bit, and then we started hosting Twitter chats and meetings, and we got more people involved, and then we managed to find a space at the Institute of Education, because he lectured a bit there, and we started building, and this is where we met Chris Emdin, who Hannah also mentioned, who set up Hip Hop Ed in America in the mid-90s. You know, they're like on hip hop studies and that kind of stuff, they're way ahead of us, because it's, you know, American culture. And we now meet semi-regularly, as she's nicely put it, at London Met Uni, and anyone's invited to come down and get involved in this dialogue about education, where it's going, who it's for, how it could be better, what the good bits are, and I think that's important as well. It's really easy, a bit like when you talk about politicians, to just paint them as like these nasty, overprivileged reptilians. But I think when you do that, you dehumanise them, and it becomes like, oh, there's no point fighting that. It's like, you know, taking a standing knife to a dragon, and it discourages the fight. Whereas if you look at these as really clever, educated people who've had massive privilege, who probably should know what they're doing and can be analytical about this shit, then you start to go, oh, maybe this isn't an accident. You know, personally, I think that the state school experiment has failed from the position of the top of the hierarchy. People start getting a little bit too clever, a little bit too skilled. You know, when we started giving teachers freedom to teach kids, and people really put their life and soul into learning different pedagogies and ideas about learning, we started developing people who could maybe compete with the elite. And that has to keep having a lid kind of put on it, because that pot boils, and I feel we're in that time at the moment. You know, this exclamation thing and this frontal adverbial nonsense that my daughters have to learn needs to, you know, they're kind of going, okay, we need to just like keep people in their place a little bit more now, because we don't really want to compete with anyone, except like my friend from the other class that he can like, I don't mind, we'll swap jobs a little bit later, and then we'll, like David Cameron, will just quit and go and earn fucking millions doing something else after screwing over an entire country. There's your public school education. And a lot of people I work with have also come through those systems and fight it with the knowledge of being in it. You know, I've never had a public school education. I can only imagine what it's like and caricature it in my mind. But a lot of my kids, I try to be honest with my kids that I work with, because they're smart, they find shit out, you know, they know when you're lying, they know when you're tired, they know when you haven't planned your lesson properly. So just like, I try and be a bit more honest about that. So a lot of them know I have a YouTube channel and I'm a poet, and you know, they occasionally leave comments like, oh, that's sick, sir. Just kind of nice, and they're like, I wonder who that is. Pokemon as their avatar. And then we like, so I heard you got bars in it, I heard you rap, like you're a rapper, and it's like, I heard you, like I watched your shit, like you swear, sir, innit? I tell you, like you swear in your stuff on YouTube, like you use all the swear words, sir, like you're bare sick because you swear. It's kind of positive feedback, I guess. And then after that, they'll just say like, yeah, but why do you do that, sir? Why do you do that poetry? Like, why do you do poetry? Like, it's kind of dead, isn't it? Like, they're like, no, yours is sick, sir, but it's kind of dead, isn't it? Like, I've learned that poetry's dead. I've learned that poetry is a thing mostly done by dead people, just before they died a long time ago. And that the way you engage with poetry is by picking out single lines and being able to highlight shit and answer questions about what the poet meant. I don't always know what my shit means. I don't know that Blake always knew what his shit really meant. It's like, you know, that poem about the daffodils, that shit ain't about daffodils. And if you're answering that he liked daffodils, it's wrong, even though it's right, apparently. So I wrote this piece for them, and then put it up on YouTube, and I hope they find it. A few have found it. It's called Why I Poet. So why do I poet? Why are we all talking? I tell them that words define reality. Language is life. And I like my mind sharp as a bread knife. Thoughts serrated, so they easily integrate. Cold disguise so only the inside can interrogate. Far from the playlists, still A-list. I spray this like pesticide. Spit this like venom snake. I slang like this, bang like this. Wait, let me demonstrate. Cypher balling, I decipher lie, so decide, and then rise. Defy the warning, I'll fight to warning, I'll write a cipher sore eyes. There's no Pulitzer Prize for the poets of poverty. But who lights the fires decides with authority. I'm licking metaphorical shots at real glass ceilings. I'm just bones and feelings, hopes, revealings. I'm video, audio, digital, analog with mixtape, stage show, couple books for sale tonight. And I'm more honky tonk than Donkey Kong, still I sing my song regardless. And when it comes to arguments, believe I am an artist. Believe I be the artist, believe my mind's a TARDIS. I'm Doctor Who gives a fuck, I'm speaking to free up the markets. My speech is just as loose as a politician's commons beef. And I see them man's validity depleting like the coral reef. They're proper chiefs with proper needs. I want a property, not property. And it's obviously not a prophecy to offer speculation on the products of democracy. I'm honestly on this. So I've got to be an optimist. Rhymes prime like optimist. My time is not to miss. It's obvious obnoxious monsters rule this earth with military. And no, we won't defeat them with our deference and humility. But me, I'll be a pacifist. It's a pacifist of fury. I'm punching lines in thunder times. Let's find our guts and glory. Thank you. Something like that inspired that piece a little bit as well, that comes from education, and there's something not strictly from Chris Emdin, but it's the theory of code switching, which I kind of like came on to like learning about when I was doing my behaviour work quite often, because it's like a weird job. Like most of my time was spent in a classroom with kids that had learned not to give a shit, had learned that they're going to fail at some point, so I'd rather fail now, go out on the road and make some money. And I'd be working with them and trying to get them to stay in school and trying to like inspire them to do creative stuff, because we have creativity. You know, that's the one thing. I was like, the one thing that when Hannah said that, I was like, I just nuancely changed that slightly. We don't need to teach anyone creativity. We need to stop stealing people's creativity and stifling their natural creativity that we all have. You know, Picasso said that about children, that you know, you're born artist and then you lose it. You're taught how not to be an artist as you grow up. And I'd find I was doing that work, and I'm from Ends, so I'll talk to them how I'm talking to you now, and they'll be like, sorry, why do you like use the same slang as us? It's like, because I'm born on the same road as you, I know your mum. We went primary school together. Yeah, I know. Your sister, innit? Yeah, remember, like, we were in the same class. And they're like, oh, this guy's deep. And I go from there to then having to go to a pre-exclusions meeting with the head teacher, a social worker, the pre-exclusions officer for Brent, which is where I work, and a whole bunch of like educated professionals. And I can't go in there and just be like, yeah, look, man, you don't be bare peak to this youth. Like, you don't really understand where man's coming from, innit? Because you ain't from Ends. Because they'll just be like, okay, we don't listen to you. He's one of those wants to be down with the kids. So I felt like to be in those spaces, I had to be able to go in and speak the most formal English and go in and use better words than they would and make my arguments more eloquent, and they sit around there like, this guy really knows his shit. We really want to kick this guy out because, you know, he's year 10 now and he's going to start messing up our GCSE results. And I was like, that's my war. My war is over here, I've got to be this guy, and over here, I have to be someone completely different who can make very rational arguments of why it would be slightly oppressive to kick someone out of school when you look at their socio-economic background, and when you look at all the situations that they've been in, and really we have a duty to this young person to keep offering them a space where they can grow, because our job shouldn't be limited by the gates of the school, and we should be engaging with wider community, and to do that we need to stop putting people from this community out of the community into institutions. And this like, fucking yeah, and then I found out later that that was like this idea of code switching, being able to move between different forms of language, different kind of like, almost like dialects, but different ways of approaching language for different audiences. And it is amazing training. That job was amazing training for doing that. And really fucking tiring. And then after a while I kind of went into, I wanted to be in the classroom. Because I was like, this is all well and good, I'm in this like little space and I've got kids I had kids come into my school last week, like just to visit. They had an alumni day, and these kids left like, I've been there nearly 10 years now, they were left like 8 years ago, and I used to run a rap club called Spit Club, deliberately called Spit Club, so that we could write Spit Club in graph writing on posters and stick them up like guerrilla marketing around the school, and have teachers going, who's writing spit? What is a Spit Club? And kind of like, I'd have like 50, 60 kids in a room about this size in a lunchtime, and I guarantee that was every hard-ass kid in the school. And occasionally teachers would come and visit, and they'd be spitting grime bars, and they'd be bringing in beats, and we'd have instruments, and we'd be recording and videoing, and it was so blessed there. Like, there was never a fight, there was never any like tension, it was all creative tension. And people would come in and kind of stand just inside the door and go, I just want to come down and see what happened in Spit. It's really good in here, isn't it? And then the other feedback I get is, it was on a Wednesday lunchtime, is people would say, I love doing my break duty on a Wednesday lunchtime. I love being in the playground because those bad kids are with you. And you'd be like, wow, you're just going to say that. You're just going to like casually, clumsily say, all these kids are the bad kids. I'm talking, there's 50 kids in this room. Have you really got around and gone, oh, they're the bad kids? Or have you kind of just looked at where on the tonal range this room would sit, which is often the case. And these kids came back, and you know, it's a braggy thing. It's not much I brag about in this world, but they were like, sir, still sir, even though they're like 20 now. They're like, Spit Club was like, that's the thing I'll remember. Like, I'm still writing bars. I'm still making music. Della, Tom's He's like, oh, I've got projects up. I've got projects coming. Like, I'm writing stuff. I mean, I've got my law degree and stuff that I'm just like trying to finish off because I'm at uni now. But I'm still like on that, and those are the things I remember. We still talk about that. And I think education has to give you that. I have those moments from my own education. I'm sure everyone has those moments from their own education where you're like, that lesson, or that person, or that trip, that's the thing I actually learned in school. Or there was loads of other content shit as well that I don't remember. I remember like the thing in science where you put your hand on it and your hair stands up. You know, like, and rough Jerry. Like, those are the things we remember, and we have a duty to give those things to the young people. And that's also something I learned from my first head teacher, because his kind of theory that stuck with me, I'm not quite sure if I'll go as far to say it was a kind of pedagogical perspective, was he was saying the kids that we get in this school who've been kicked out, they're not going to compete academically with their peers who have gone through mainstream school. So rather than just trying to catch them up a bit so they're only a lot behind, let's give them shit that these kids aren't getting. Because there's only 40 kids in this school. So we can go to the Swiss embassy where his girlfriend worked and see like a string octet. And we can go to all these places that mainstream school kids don't get to go to and give experiences that are more than this curriculum offers. You know, this one curriculum for everybody. And that really touched me, and it is like annoyingly makes me go, yeah, I should carry on doing this. Even though it means I get up at 6:30 every morning. If I was actually a poet, I'd still be drunk at 6:30 in the morning, in a bar in Soho, you know, going home on the same train as everyone's going to work on. That shit would be a lot cooler, but okay, I'll carry on working in school.